call the regular meeting of the North Coast Railroad Authority to order. We'll call the roll here momentarily, and I just want to note that two of our directors are teleconferencing in, Director Arnold and Director McLean. Did I correct that? Pronounce that correct, Jeannie? McLean. Okay, my apologies. Heather, would you call the roll, please?
Director Simonson.
Here.
Director Kelly.
Here.
Director Woolley.
Here.
Director Olivier.
Here.
Director Zedrick.
Here.
Director Colfax. Director Arnold. Director Leland. Alternate Director Jean McLeany.
Thank you. Just a couple of procedural issues that are going to be taken up by the Policies and Procedures Committee prior to the next meeting. Jeannie, we're struggling with the definition of an alternate member because there's no provision in our bylaws for it, so certainly we welcome you here today and invite your participation, but we need to find out what we can do in this regard. So I'm going to ask that the Policies and Procedures Committee take this up and come back with a board recommendation at the next meeting. Secondly, there's a question of teleconferencing, which sometimes we have the capability of and sometimes we don't. So again, we're doing it today, but I'm going to also ask that the Policies and Procedures Committee take that question up and come back with a recommendation. I will note that as an action in closed session, when we go, I've made a recommendation that we do not have teleconferencing on a closed session. It will be up to the board in closed session to dispose of that issue at that point in time, one way or the other. So,
Mr. Chairman, I spoke with Jeannie, I'm not sure right now how to pronounce her last name, yesterday, and because there is a question of whether or not there is a provision for an alternate director, because the County Council of Marin County is looking at this question, believes it's a legitimate question. She has agreed to not participate as a director, rather as an observer or listener today. Is that correct, Jeannie?
That is.
okay. Well, thank you.
And I have a question, Alan.
Yes.
To Judy. So today I will participate in a closed session, and then what you're saying is you want the policy committee to discuss this at a later time about teleconferencing participating in closed session. Is that correct?
Yes, we're going to have the closed session right here, but just so you know, I am recommending that we not have teleconferencing at the closed session, and that'll be the first item that we take up in the meeting, and you'll be present at that point in time.
Okay. Let me just add that I think that because this involves proceedings of the board, that the discussion of teleconferencing in closed session should really be a public agenda item.
Well, I don't have any particular problem with that. Chris, do you have any advice as to whether we can do that when we haven't noticed it?
No. I think that the board has the inherent authority to conduct its own closed sessions and its decisions regarding its conduct of closed sessions is a closed session issue.
So you're saying we should not discuss it in open session, or we should discuss it in open session?
I'm saying that you don't have to discuss it in open session.
Well, Director Kelly.
The issue is related to our policy, whether or not we have teleconferencing for closed session. I think that's the recommendation that you have before us. Obviously, even the reference back to the policy committee, whatever the policy and procedures committee comes up with, that'll be an agendized item for full discussion on whether or not the full board wants to adopt those policy and procedures, and that'll be noticed and identified in the board meeting. Now, as it relates to today, I'm not sure exactly if we can even take that up since it's not a posted item on our agenda.
Well, I think legitimately it can be taken up as a closed session item, from what I understand. And I have no objection to having some conversation about it right here, but I believe we can't take action until we go into closed session. So there's nothing that's being attempted to be slid under the rug here. We have concerns about the confidentiality of closed session when we don't control the audience at the other end of the phone line. Here we can see them and we know who's exactly in the room. So I think that's the major concern right there. And I want to differentiate between that discussion today and the ultimate discussion of teleconferencing in the general sense of open meetings. That'll be determined later on based on a decision of the board that'll be noticed and recommendations from the Policies and Procedures Committee. But Judy, I welcome your comment right now in public forum.
Let me just add a couple of comments, and thank you, Chair. Those of us who have been elected have been rigorously schooled in the Brown Act and the seriousness of any violation of the Brown Act. So, for example, we know that I can only talk to one director about an item on the agenda, not more than one. And certainly we know that when we go into closed session, there's to be nobody in the room, and any violation of that would seriously jeopardize an elected official's reputation. So those of us who are elected would never dream of violating the Brown Act, and we have been taken mandatory courses in it. So that's number one. Number two, in regard to the availability of teleconferencing, you just buy a speakerphone and turn it on speakerphone, and there's your teleconference. To expect the Marin representative to go to Eureka is asking a lot, especially for elected officials in the middle of a busy agenda. So, barring all of this, if, for example, you decide, if the committee and the full board decides not to do teleconferencing, then I would suggest either having one of your meetings in Marin or at the least Petaluma, or having all the meetings in Healdsburg, which is sort of the midway point where we often make all the meetings. So those are my comments on it.
Yeah, I'll lead off the response. I think certainly the question of meeting location is something that the Policies and Procedures Committee can take a look at. Secondly, I want to assure you that I have every confidence that you're sensitive to Brown Act issues. The problem is, as a matter of precedent, another director who may not be as well versed as you are could ask for the same privilege. And so I think we need to look at it as an overarching question rather than an individual question of the quality of our director's knowledge of how to handle themselves.
Maybe Chris could do a little seminar to all the directors on how to behave with the Brown Act.
In fact, we have done that in the past a little bit recently. I'd like to open this up for discussion from any of the other directors who may have an opinion on this at this point. Director Woolley?
Yeah, this is interesting. This is interesting in the light of what we're dealing with. I think the fact that it hasn't been agendized, and though we may want to consider something, I think at this time, because we don't have a policy guiding us, that we probably have to allow for all of us to participate at this juncture within the closed session. I can see reasons for not, but since that's not part of this discussion, I think barring that, we just got to go forward and be wary of what we're also talking about. As far as moving our meetings around, I'm looking, Judy, at a room full of people that I don't believe would be willing to go down to even Healdsburg. And there is a long tradition of moving the meeting from location to location where the rail exists. So I'd have problems doing that. And I know we have busy schedules, but us up here make time and place to go to the meetings down in Healdsburg. So just to talk about that, but we'll definitely bring it up. Who is the Policy Procedures Committee anyway?
You're the chairman.
Oh my God. Well, there you go. Thank you.
Judy Arnold and Jim Freeman are on it, and I believe one other member. I'm not sure.
Yeah, so I think there's a well-rounded committee that represents all the interests. So I am going to kick it to there. Is there any other director that has an opinion on this they want to declare in public session, and then we will take it up in closed session?
Well, let me just add two things. Number one, I agree with Director Woolley. I think that I should be allowed to participate in this closed session today because the policy committee has not met with a ruling to bring to the board, a suggestion to the board. Number one. Number two, none of the items discussed in closed session can ever be discussed outside of closed session. And in regard to Marin's representation, the rail runs through Marin. The freight's going to run through Nevada, so we're just as important an entity to be represented as Eureka. And I understand that there's a big distance between them, but Marin is fully desirous of participating fully in these. And what we had thought and hoped was that a teleconference might be a great idea, so that if Eureka could participate if they didn't want to come to Healdsburg, but we can discuss this later.
Yeah, again, as far as today, I tend to agree with you at this point in time. I think we can manage to get through this meeting without us worrying too much about it. But I am going to insist that this question be taken up by the Policy and Procedures Committee and a recommendation come back to the board for discussion at the November meeting. So, unless any of the
Am I on
directors...
that committee?
Yes, you are. So good luck with it.
And don't have a meeting in Guilford,
Well, I'll leave that to the chair, but I think he'll try to be considerate in that regard. Well, leaving that, let's move to the agenda approval. We have a motion to that effect.
So moved.
We have a motion second. Any discussion on the agenda? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the agenda stands approved. At this point in time, we have matters from the board. Are there any matters that the board would like to bring forward that are not on the agenda? Director Woolley?
Simply, I now have maps related to the D or areas that are covering the corridor. So for many reasons of both the trail planning and billboard questions, we're down to getting that information to us, and I'd like to hand it over to staff for their work. There remains, however, 4 missing deeds, and so we've got those identified by APN number. So we're going off to the assessor's office today to capture those and add that to the mix. So, Mitch, here you go.
Any other directors have a comment they'd like to make? There being none, then we'll move to the consent calendar. We have 5 items on the consent calendar. Motion approved.
So moved.
Second. Any discussion on the consent calendar? Anything from the public on the consent calendar? Call for approval then. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the consent calendar stands approved. At this point in time, an important part of our agenda is to recognize public comment. We ask that you limit your comments to not more than 10 minutes per subject and 3 minutes per presenter in light of the many views that we may have on these things. So come up and identify yourself, identify the subject if you will, and we'll turn the microphone.
Good morning. My name is Marcus Brown. I'm the president of the Timber Heritage Association, and I want to talk about trails and rail. Actually, my primary focus I wanted to talk about was in Arcata, but in view of the signs out front and so on, I wanted to broaden it out just a moment. I'm a member of the National Association of Railway Passengers, and they have a thing sourced with carbonfund.org. And talks about the climate impact of different modes of transportation. And it shows, let's see, this is CO2 emissions per passenger mile. And shows Amtrak 0.196, cars are double that, airplanes are double that. So another number I've that we've heard when there was somebody from the Association of American Railroads did that presentation, that if you put a ton of cargo in my work van, 1 gallon of fuel will take that ton down the road 12 miles. Put that same ton of cargo on a freight train, and a gallon of fuel will take that same cargo 400 miles. And so I want to say to people that trains are part of the solution to global warming. And we need both trails and rails. We need trains and trails. And to that end, when the National Park Service sent me an application for technical assistance on trails, I contacted Dave Mazur, who's here, and eventually that ended up with HCOG and this whole study of how to put the trail alongside the rail. And so we are staunch supporters of having both. We need both, and I think that's a common sense approach. So what I wanted to talk about was the other day when I went to pick up my van from my mechanic, whose shop is next to the tracks, he said, "I want to talk to you. I heard that the city of Arcata wants to take over the rail and make it all into a trail." I said, "I don't think so." But I have been surprised. I've heard some credible talk that the rail ought to be turned over, dated to a trail from basically Sunset Avenue towards the West End Road. And I want to say that that's the way to get out to Humboldt Lake Board. And Dan Hauser's told me that when he was running the railroad, Humboldt Lake Board was a major source of car loadings, and also our diesel for our excursion train is sitting out there. So I want to reiterate, we've got to keep the tracks intact. You know, I support trails because I ride bicycle. I like to walk on trails too. So I personally want to have both. Our organization has also been working on the 4th Saturday to go out and clear brush off the tracks. And so we've gotten 9/10 of a mile starting at the Samoa Cookhouse driveway and working our way towards Manila. So again, I've been asked not to press our agenda of putting a tourist train on the tracks too soon, but as soon as possible, as soon as it would work for the operator, we would like to show life on the railroad here on this end, because somebody said to me today, the use it or lose it phenomena is really pressing hard here. Thanks very much.
Good morning, President Hemphill and members. My name is Bill Keir, and I'm a business owner here in Humboldt County. In a public meeting in Eureka last month, NCRA board member Charles Olivier stated that rail service will be restored to Humboldt Bay within 3 years and for $100 million. In July, the NCRA declared concerning its Russian River Division freight rail project that this project does not propose freight service north of the road. These are clearly contradictory statements, and we here are obviously getting mixed signals from NCRA and Humboldt County representatives. Could you tell us which of the two statements is true, which is not?
I'd be happy to respond to that. Just trying to make sure Judy and the rest of them are here. The Russian River Division is viewed as a separate part of the entire rail system, and the applications for funding and the repairs on that section are being done under what we call independent utility. In other words, it's had a history of being operated as a separate division, as a separate railroad for all intents and purposes. And the applications and the environmental processes that were necessary to push that forward had to recognize that even if nothing ever happened north of Willits, that as a standalone operation, it was viable. So we've been focused on that. The overall responsibility of the North Coast Rail Authority, as opposed to the physical railroad, is to maintain the railroad and eventually restore all the different portions of the railroad, including the Eel River Division and the section up here around Humboldt Bay. It appears to be a contradiction, but it's not. It has to do with where we are at a moment in time and how we view that independent section of the railroad down there. We have never ever publicly or privately abandoned the NCRA's goal to open the entire railroad at a point in time. The question is when and how and for what reasons.
Seems to me, President Hemphill, that if Mr. Olivier's statement was correct, and that rail service will be restored to Humboldt Bay within 3 years for $100 million, that is a project that is very closely akin to whatever you're doing from Old South. That is, you must have project underway in order to accomplish the restoration of rail service to Humboldt Bay within 3 years.
Well, I didn't make that statement, and I'll let Charles respond to that when it's appropriate, but there is currently the only activity that's going on other than what we're trying to do to hold things together up here with the levee is the environmental process, which is a very lengthy process of identifying as a first step prior to looking for funding or anything else exactly what the environmental issues are and what it would take to open the other canyon. That is underway as we speak. And
Well, if you're...
but certainly, you know, the 3-year time frame and $100 million, I can't speak to that. That's
Perhaps Mr. Olivier could clarify.
Mr. Q is represents the opposition in my current election on the Harbor Committee. I don't recall ever making that statement. Oops. I mean, I've made a lot of statements. A lot of them, I'm sure, were wishful thinking. And I really always remember.
We can hear you laughing.
That's right. It's laughable. I heard the opposition say we need $800 million, so I really don't know at this time. I don't recall. I might have whispered in somebody's ear. I would never say that.
I'm sorry, Mr. Olivier, you were in a public meeting.
A public meeting,
You made a statement. Now, was that a truth, or was that what you call wistful thinking?
Probably wishful thinking on my part, I'm sure.
well, I'm going to tie this off. Mr. Olivier's answered the question, and I hope I've answered it. Certainly, it's the NCRA's mandate legislatively to preserve and enhance the railroad all up and down the corridor. They have a project on the southern end that's not a conflict.
Mr. Hemphill, I think even your response is very unclear as to whether you have projects underway north of Willits, and therefore whether the statement in your July document.
Mitch, would you help with this? Perhaps I'm
Yeah,
using the wrong words. I thought I was clear.
For all of those people who purposely try to confuse the issue, I hope you listen. Number one, we are doing the repairs on 142 miles of railroad, the first phase, which is 62 miles from the interchange to Lombard. We're doing it with traffic congestion relief program funds. The cost of that first phase from Lombard to Windsor, we estimate to be about $26 million. That work is underway. It involves the replacement of 50,000 ties, 60,000 tons of ballast, repair to 42 bridges, 4 movable bridges, and other things, including the Brazos Bridge and the Black Point Bridge. That work is underway. There's a city down there that wants to try to stop those repairs. We're going full steam ahead with those repairs. In addition thereto, there's a bill on the governor's desk that hopefully will be signed by Monday that specifically says work will commence north of Willits when the CTC approves a complete EIR, EIS for that section, and a feasibility study is approved by the commission. We are operating under that assumption. So the extent to which it's 100 million, it's 500 million, it's 600 million, you put any number you want on it, Mr. Kier, we will know that when we complete...
Doctor, is it 1 year or 2 years or 3 years?
When we complete the environmental impact...
Can you complete that in 3 years?
That's a good question. We'll know when we initiate it.
Thank you for your comments.
My name is Lawrence Wheeland. I'm a medical doctor. I've been here since 1974. And first of all, I want to corroborate Mr. Bill Tier's comments. I was there at the same public meeting. I heard Mr. Olivier's speech about there would be an operational railroad along the North Coast within 3 years at a cost of about $100 million. Is this speculation, is this misinformation? The public here and the people of Mendocino and Marin deserve accurate information about railroad development, not speculation or misinformation that only confuses the public. As I understand it, the railroad corridor is publicly owned land. The public demands accountability and open participation in options for development of the railroad corridors, especially since we, the public, taxpayers, carry the burden of cost of these options. I believe the majority of the public would choose trails over rails. The Alta Planning and Design completed the Humboldt Bay Trails feasibility study commissioned by HCOG 7/2007 defines clearly the health and economic benefits of trails. I've been participating in practicing medicine in Eureka since 1974. I know very well about diseases of Western civilization and the preventive benefits of exercise, especially in the scenic outdoors such as along our beautiful bay. These diseases of epidemic proportion are obesity, diabetes, hypertension, heart disease, anxiety, depression, and exercise can even play a role with our immune systems in cancer prevention. There perhaps isn't any more important project development than the trails for the public health of our community. Think about the joy our community and tourists alike would have along this trail. This would be visible to the 101 corridor traffic. What a great advertisement to entice others to use the trail and to get exercise. I advise my patients to exercise by commuting to work on their bicycles. Many answer they are afraid to ride on the roads. This would provide an enjoyable, safe commuter option between Eureka and Arcata. Alta study estimates 30,000 commuters per year would use the trails between Eureka and Arcata. Many of our community envision the Hammond Trail connected with the Annie and Mary Trail and the Bay Trail. In the Alta Planning and Design Study, estimated medical benefits in dollars is $84.7 million per annum and $4.8 million economic boost to our area. That adds up to $90 million per year, and over a 10-year period comes to $900 million. This is all in the Alta Planning and Design Study, if you're interested. How long has it been since the railroad has been operational and in the black? I mean paying for itself. I hear the NCRA has spent in excess of $40 million over the last 10 years, and I ask, what do we have to show for that on the North Coast? I don't want to subsidize railroads that we are trying hard to invent purposes of needs for at this time. I hear approximate costs for an operational rails from Willits are in the $650 million range. Maybe in 15 to 20 years, there will be a railroad need. I'm not against railroads. The railroad obstacles are great through the Eel River Canyon with floods, mountain slides, and earthquakes that can make the rails non-operational at a moment's notice or a blink of an eye. We've seen that happen all too often. That's why it's not running today. The North Coast Railroad Association has had more than ample time to make the rails happen. It's time to put in trails. With railroad banking option available for future rails, if ever deemed by the majority of the public as a viable option. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Doctor. Certainly I could agree with many of them, but I want to take issue with one point. I don't recall seeing either you or the previous speaker at any of our meetings. Had you been here, this is a very transparent process in terms of the planning and the hurdles we've tried to overcome over the years to reopen the entire railroad. You would have known, as you could learn today if you sit and watch some of what we're doing here, that everything that we have in terms of our timing and our phasing and the challenges that it takes to get the funding to do this has been done in the public forum. There are a number of people here that I've seen regularly that can testify to that. So, again, before you make statements about us confusing the public or anything else, you should attend our meetings and listen. You should go on site, on the different sites we have that have our plans. They're all in the public view, and I'm very proud of that fact on behalf of the board. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair,
I have just one comment. Are your meetings always at 10 a.m. on Wednesdays?
did you say yes?
Yes, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Okay. I'm just wondering if perhaps, for the benefit of apparently there are some people up there, quite a few speaking on trails, might we be able to agenda
Yes, I think so. That's 3 months out. I do want to respect some of the speakers here. I'm going to request a little more brevity, though. We do have a lot of important business, so if I can have a pledge from the rest of the speakers, we'll proceed on with this. We do want to hear what you have to say, but we have people down there that are going to run out of time for some of the other important action items. So,
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Director Willie.
Yeah, I could say under matters of the board, I could do a quick where we are in the planning process, but why don't we go through the public speakers? And then
Okay, thank you, and then I'll take you up on that, John.
Yeah, I just had the one question, that the meetings are always at 10 a.m. on Wednesday morning. It's a hard time for businesses. I have a practice I have to cancel like hours.
Well, due respect to that, we have people that drive 200 miles to get up here, and they get up at 4 in the morning to get here, and they have to get back. I don't have to tell you what the highway conditions are up here in the wintertime and stuff, so.
This is the usual time.
This is the usual time, yes.
Thank you.
Hi. My name's John Webb. I live in Trinidad, and I'll try to be brief. Probably I'm here more than anything else to say that I'm distressed that the, for lack of a better term, railroading that's going on to push you into choosing between rails and trails. If you choose trails, you get rid of rails forever. That's been true. You will be presented by many people with the option of rail banking. Sounds like a good idea. Do you know anyone who's ever made a withdrawal from a rail bank? Do you know anyone who's ever rebuilt a railroad that has been torn up under the rail banking program? I don't know of any such situation. There are people who want to use the railroad right-of-way for other purposes. Some of those purposes are perfectly fine and noble, but that eliminates the purpose of the railroad if it is turned over to be strictly a trail. Bicycles are fine. I like them. I use them. But not everybody can use a bicycle for transportation. You can't ship a carload of lumber on bicycle trails. You cannot have elderly people or disabled people or very young people use the trail from Eureka to Arcata as a form of inner-city transportation on bicycles. It just can't happen. So there is a certain segment of society that could use it, but at the cost to another segment of society. I need for you to keep that in mind. I think rails and trails are the way to go. We have vast sums of money being proposed to be spent by the state of California on the 101 corridor between Eureka and Arcata. And Caltrans apparently has given zero thought to using any of that in any kind of holistic way, looking at the corridor to include rail and trails and bikes. They only see it in terms of automobiles. Rather than include a whole bunch of new freeway interchanges, why not take some of that money and shift it over to building a trail next to the rail? So when people come up and present a dichotomy of rail or trail, think about it. It can be rails and trails, not one or the other, and not one after the other, but simultaneously in the same time and place. So I want to say one more thing, and Marcus Brown alluded to use it or lose it. You're fast approaching the political point of using it or losing it. People want to see rail traffic happening on those decaying railroad lines, and if they don't see it happening, their votes are going to go towards using that public entity for something else. And I don't think this board has ever really understood that. Seen over the years a lot of political back and forthing and very little to show in the way of results, especially up here on the north end. And so I think you need to think about that. You are approaching a use it or lose it situation. Thank you.
Be assured we think about it all the time, but a letter to the governor wouldn't hurt. Thank you.
Okay, Strickland, Citizens Report Development and Railroad returning. And you certainly see me up here a lot, and I've been giving some history lessons here and there, and if I ever have the time to do it, I need to do some my word columns because I have talked to several people. And I thank you, Chairman Allen, for your comments to the previous speakers, because a lot of them haven't been around for the historical situation that you have gone through for all these many years. And I could spend 10 minutes on everything that
Maybe
I
3.
came here to talk, but I won't. I'll save my history lesson. I just would like to say, we as a group do support safe, multi-use trails along the bay, along the 101 corridor, if there's room and as long as the rail is still there and not banked. Because like Mr. Webb said, do you know of any rail banking where the rail has been brought back? I don't. And I do support trails. But I'd also like to comment on the economic benefit of retaining the rail. We are really interested, and we work with Timber Heritage Association. We would like to see a tourist train here sooner than the full rail probably could be brought back. And they just were visited by a group from Medford who are very into tourist train and that kind of thing. So there's a lot of benefits that can be made economically with the rail, with either the tourist train or eventually the full rail. It will provide good jobs, good economic benefits, so that people can afford to live here, can afford to have their children in school here, can afford to keep the school numbers up, and can be able to live here and use the trail. So I'm not going to go into anything more except that I just want to emphasize that trails, yes, with rail. And I really think that the Green Wheels folks have done a good job. And I think they probably did feel like they had to come here today and get their message across. But they also know our point of view of rail, okay, with our trail, okay, with rail.
Thank you, Ken.
And, just one more thing. Don't stop coming up here. I've been down there. I'm not going to go to Marin County in the middle of winter.
You should. It's a beautiful county.
I'm not going to go there in the middle of summer either.
You're
It's too
more
hot. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, NCRA Board. I am Aaron Antrim, the Outreach Director for Green Wheels, and I'm also a Humboldt County homeowner, university employee, and owner of a small consulting firm. And so I'd like to comment on the rail trail issue as it is. Our interest is in the right-of-way for a Humboldt Bay Trail. And recently, the Alta Planning Design produced the feasibility study. They said $32 million for rails with trails. So rails with trails work for us, but there's no rail to put the trail next to, which makes that hard to fund. If we're trying to get grant funding and we're embarking on a very expensive project for a rail that doesn't exist, and it's just flatly expensive given its uncertainty. And it seems to me that a better description of the current approach that a lot of people favor, rail with trail, it seems to me a better way of saying it is no rail with no trail, because that's what we have today. And I grew up in Eureka. I remember being excited about the return of the railroad when I was in either junior high or elementary school. I've graduated from college and it hasn't happened. And I've graduated from college and started a business. And so, I really, I think, use it or lose it. It is true, and we need to start using that corridor. We need to use it so we can rail bank and continue to have that right away if at some time the rail does become viable and returns. So I'd like to pass out to the board some excerpts from the recent ALTA study. I have here, let's see, could. That would be great. So I'm handing out some excerpts from the HCOG Commission study. You can get the full study at www.hcog.net. Now, in Tuesday's Reporter, Chairman Hempel was quoted as saying, "You've not seen any proposals for rail banking." Now, the feasibility study is the beginning, or not proposal, plan. No plan for rail banking. Now, the feasibility study is the beginnings of a plan. And it's impossible or very difficult to secure funding to try and develop a plan when we don't have participation from, one of the main entities we're going to need to work with. And so I'm asking you here today to agendize that discussion so that we can have this discussion that the whole community is hungering for. So we have here, if you look at the, let me get out my...
I'm going to ask you if you can just capsulize it for us. I mean, we really do have to move
Okay,
on.
I'll try and wrap up in about a minute here.
If we get it on the agenda, certainly we'll be able to go into it in greater depth.
So here we have the trail would provide tremendous benefits, and those are noted on one of the handouts I've given you. 4.6 annually in economic benefits, 84 in health benefits. Over the course of the last 10 years, when we've not had a running railroad and not had a trail, we've lost over $800 million for our community there. I also want to highlight the fact that the rail with trail option is far more expensive than the rail banking option. And I've made some notes on the side there. One of the main notes, so we have here about $31.2 million for rail with trail, $14.8 million for the rail banking option. But the thing I want to highlight is that option 4, that's rail banking, includes the cost to install new railroad track at about $6 million. Now, I understand that to restore the railroad to working order, that track is going to need to be replaced. And the option 1 here, rail with trail, only includes about a $1.7 million expense to relocate those tracks. So the cost comparison is even more dramatic than can simply be stated.
Again, we're going to be willing to go into this in greater depth, so I'm going to ask you to kind of sum it up.
Okay, I'll sum it up very quickly. Thank you. So to conclude, a rail banking-like arrangement would restore public trust in the NCRA by putting the right-of-way to immediate use. The prison has to be rebuilt anyway, so removing trails wouldn't negatively impact, so removing rails would not negatively impact railroad reconstruction. And the trail would build trust and freight projections for the south end by showing that the north end, the plans for the north end are long-term. And so my big question is, what is the realistic time for the restoration of freight on the North Coast? Will it always be receding into the future? And the second question is, if the Eel River Division plans are not even included in the CEQA documentation for upcoming restoration of rail service, can we agree that rail service to Humboldt Bay is speculative at this time? Thank you.
Thank you. For the rest of the speakers, I would ask that if you have some new ground to plow on this, please feel free briefly again, but let's not be repetitive. We're trying to be courteous about this, but we're going to be running out of time for the rest of our meeting.
Believe me, I understand your position very well, having been there. Dave Mazur from Arcata. I really hate false dichotomies, and that's what we're faced with here is rail or trail, and the idea that if we don't build a trail now at $13 million, we'll never get the money, the $31 million, to build a rail with trail. That's just plain unrealistic. As someone else said, Caltrans is poised to spend $60 million out there for a highway that nobody really wants improved, as they say, improved to 65 miles per hour. I think what really needs, and when I was on the Trails Planning Committee early, and the consensus of that group was that we wanted to see rail with trail. Numerous polls of the community have shown that rail with trail is the favored option. Okay, it costs about twice as much money, but we've got $60 million of transportation money sitting out there looking for a purpose, or at least a way that we could all work together and make this happen. Combined with this is the fact that the highway is never going to be secure until that dike that the railway sits on, the prism, is secure. So what really needs to happen here is for the entities, the cities, the county, the railroad authority, the trail advocates, and Caltrans to all work together and come up with a solution that gives us what we need. There's a 250-foot right-of-way out there, including Caltrans and the railroad. Alta has shown that the 50-foot right-of-way would carry a rail and a trail at an approximate cost of $31 million. So rather than say, I really am fed up with people saying that the railroad is blocking the trail. The railroad is not blocking the trail. What is blocking it is the need for a multimodal transportation corridor committee to look at what we, the people of the area, want to see in the future out there. And I think what we want to see is a viable highway. We would like to see a tourist train that people have worked so hard to move forward. The rails are still good. The ties need replacing. So what I'm proposing is that this authority work together with other authorities in the area and come up with a plan that can provide for rail, trail, and multimodal transportation. Thank you. Thank you.
Good morning, I'm P.A. Winterson. I'm from Eureka. I ride a bike. I haven't been to Arcata in a long, long time because I don't really like the 101. I rode it once when I was here on vacation. And I would way like to have a trail of some kind. And I love rail. When I first heard this whole thing, I went, oh yeah, we have a... How about if we just agree that the Eel River Canyon is not up for grabs? And we can just go, no, we'll just north of it and south of it, just blow it up. Because then we can all have what we want, and we have the money to do it.
Thank you. You do get the prize for brevity.
Hi, my name is Pete Nichols. I'm a Humboldt Baykeeper, and you'll be happy to know that I've truncated my comments a bit while I was standing in line. I'd like to talk a little bit about the timeline for resumption of service back here to the North Coast. In July, your operator, John Williams, stated in a meeting in Nevada that the NCRA has no plans or funding to do rehabilitation north of Willits, and that there's an indefinite or uncertain time that anything north of Willits will be open. My question is, when will resumption of service come back to the North Coast? And is there a committee in place, staff in place, that is dealing with developing an appropriate timeline?
I think I can answer that. Again, the first step in identifying whether rail service will come back, and I have to say whether, to be honest, and I think I would agree with John Williams' comment that we have to take it in the context of which it was offered. We can't develop plans until we do environmental documents, and we are committed to doing this thing right. There's tremendous sensitivity of the Eel River Canyon, and within those documents will be studies of what the traffic levels will be, and if those traffic levels can be identified, and if the mitigation that's necessary to do it in an environmentally sound way is proven, then the next step is the plans. So there's no contradiction in not having plans yet. It's a 4 or 5 step process. The final piece of the puzzle then is getting the funding. There's weaving in and out of this. There's the concept that the NCRA has just kind of abandoned the North Coast. Our mandate is for the entire railroad, and we are committed to it. But in terms of phasing, we have to do the northern end right, and we currently don't have the funds even to do the plans. So we need to source the funding after we do the environmental work and after those environmental activities, come up with a game plan as to how it would need to be done to do it in an environmentally sensitive way. Then the plans will come, and then we go for the funding.
So it seems though there should be a little bit of reality injected into this conversation, though, because you're easily have the ability to come up with a strategic plan that said 2011 we're going to be back here on the North Coast. It seems to me that you can go through that same process to say it'll be 2020 or 2025.
I'm not going to pick a date. We have been badly out of step with reality based on funding that has been promised to us and withdrawn in the past, and I think this board at this stage is not in a position to make promises we can't keep. But we do have a process to identify with it, and we have a mandate as a public agency to restore rail service if it is feasible.
We're already mandating that. I think it should be modified at some point.
We
However,
can't legislatively, we're in this.
and it should be looked at legislatively. But my point is that we have projects here on the North Coast that can be moving forward with multimodal transportation along the corridor between Eureka and Arcata in a 20-year time frame, if you were to rail back. If you were just to come out and say, we have plans 20, 25 years, 30 years down the road, which it looks like probably is the reality to do this, we could work with you to develop these plans for rail banking and move your agenda forward for bringing that rail back. A lot of that work dovetails with the work that you need to do on the line anyway. So that's my point on that. On a related note, I'd like to see if I can get an update on the billboard lease situation. I know John
I think that'll be spoken to.
mentioned something, yeah, and I'd like to get an update. I know you mentioned something about that a year ago or so, and we haven't really heard too much of an update on that, so I'd like to get some information on that as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
My name is Mark Mattioli. I live in Eureka at 2134. Is this for us here?
No.
Oh, that's somebody else. Okay. That's the city of Eureka. I live in Eureka, and am a lifelong resident here. And I'm really for the railroad, and that we continue to have that railroad. It's been here 100 years. It's been kept open in some times when we didn't have a lot of the equipment that we have today. We need to keep it here. I think it's the railroad between here and Willits is like $1 billion asset. It's our asset. It's all of our assets. By jeopardizing, which I think trail rail idea can do, by jeopardizing the rail through and around to Arcata and Samoa, I think we jeopardize the possibility of the rail being viable in the future. I was told the other day by my friend Mel here that a trail cannot be within 20 foot of the rail by, I think, federal rules. You can't have a rail and a trail that close. The corollary to that is that if you had a trail, the rail couldn't be nearby anymore. I think by putting a trail too close to the rail, we make the rail inviolable. I know it's taken a long time. I've been a supporter of the rail for a long time, and we've followed the loss of the federal monies that came from the storm. We've tried to get the legislature to release that money, which might have made a difference today. The fears that we had about not releasing the monies and getting the rail back in play seem to be coming to fruition today. That it's sitting there and therefore not valuable. It's not being used and therefore it isn't a rail anymore. It is a rail, and it is valuable, and it's valuable to the entire community. Trail's a great idea. I'm a bike rider. I ride my bike to Miranda and back. I can do that. I enjoy the outdoors and the rail and the trail. And the trail is a good idea around the bay. I love walking around our bay here, and I think the trail idea overall is a very good one. But if it takes away an asset that we all own, I think that's something that you, as directors, need to be careful about. That's basically my point. I don't think that's new, but I wanted to tell you that much. And I welcome the opportunity to talk more about it, an agenda item. You do have a big responsibility. You are looking after the rail, and from what I see so far, I know you're taking it very seriously. Its value is very important to the entire community. We've had some serious setbacks as to weather and other financial conditions, which I hope we can change. Last point I make is I've always said that a rail is a valuable transportation help me with the word, asset. Thank you. And why don't we take a little of our tax from gas tax and put it toward rail? Because it's a public entity, and I think that would be a good thing. I've always pursued that we pursue gas tax for rail too. Thank you, Frank.
Thank you very much.
Daniel Pierce. I'll be brief. It's your mandate's the problem here. You look at the public here and they want to bury the rail. Why they want to bury the rail? Because the rail's only going to do one thing. It's going to move freight. And if we made things in this country, we wouldn't be bringing all the shipping containers in from other countries. And if there's a war, you can forget about stuff coming in. Now, the real things I've been coming here for every time is trying to share this rail. We got one thing, we're going to bury it, or we're going to move freight on it. Where's the passenger trains? I mean, in Humboldt County, we have a rail system that goes right next to Humboldt State University and next to CR. And where I live in McKinleyville, you can forget about the students paying for gas to get to CR. Right now, the price of gas, if you live in Arcata and you take a CR class because it's cheaper, you spend more on gasoline than you would if you just stayed in Arcata and went to HSU. Now that's the future of our world, is the students. And if you don't want to invest in the students, you just invest in money and power, and that's where we're going down this. And I was in Arcata and I talked about how we had this storm and how the rails were all like washed out, and they were saying that the rails is a buffer against the bay. But it's not, it's all washed out. The gravel's washed out. And right there near Breakat, the rails go over a bridge and there's a big divot. So if there's ever a flood or something in the bay, all this information down Highway 101, the bypass, and or for Jacobs and stuff, they didn't look at raising the roadway at all. That's Caltrans for you. But they want to move more people up and down the corridor. We have something that we can share, and we can move passenger trains on. And forget about the Hill River Corridor or Canyon for now. But the object is to change your mandate so that it says we use the rail for the best service of the public. Because when you move people around and products around, you move people, products, and ideas. And in Japan, all their trains go down one rail line. The bullet train, the slow train, all of it. It's all engineered, it's all timed out. It all can be done. And if it gets to the point where we need more passenger line, it can be built too. But you look at the public here, they want to bury your railroad line. I don't want to see the railroad line. I know you don't. That's not your mandate. The mandate is to help the public the best way you can. And if you made a public entity where you can move people from the airport to the redwood trees, I'd fill those trains up every weekend with the tourists.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Karen Deemer, and I'm here representing the Rail Trail Planning Group that has been spoken about today. And this has been a group that really has had tremendous participation from all of your key stakeholder groups that are here locally, the cities of Arcata and Eureka, the county, Caltrans, the North Coast Timber Heritage Museum, the Wiyot Tribe, have been coming together and working on this issue, really as a result of a lot of the concerns that you're hearing today. That group, your representative to that group is Director Woolley, and he has participated, I think, in every meeting that we've had. The work of that group, and has been spoken here before today, the mission of that group was to look for options of rail with trail. And the work of that group has culminated in the Alta planning document that has been discussed here today as well. That group will be meeting later this month to do their final analysis of the Alta planning document, to start to answer a lot of the questions that I think have arisen as we've all read through it sort of at a first glance, and to be creating a list of next steps that we would be bringing to this board. So what I'm really here today is just to kind of offer this group as a support for this board. Definitely in planning your next agenda item, I think I would ask as a result of hearing stuff here today that we do plan for that meeting, that we do have that meeting here locally. But I really ask the board to use this group to help you plan that meeting. We'd be happy to do a presentation. We'd be happy to have Alta come and present their findings themselves. And then whatever else you think would be helpful in terms of process steps, you really have a tremendous group in place to offer some support to the board in how we move forward on rail and trail within this area.
Thank you, and I think it's safe to say we'll take you up in your office.
Thank you. My name is Jerry Tomzak. I'm with the Timber Heritage Association. I'm on the Tourist and Excursion Train Committee. And I have a few comments, but I wrote a letter, so I'm going to pass that on with some pictures that I took at our last work party so that I can be brief. Basically, one of my concerns is that we not have any abandonment or cutting of the track in the Arcata area, because we have a locomotive located at Humboldt Plateboard on West End Road that is about 75% restored and could be operational FRA standards within a short time. This is the only operating or near operating locomotive north of Willits that I know of. And I just want to express my concern that we not give up on the tracks. And a couple other things. Companies have been moving out of the area because of the cost of transportation. So the railroad is important to the local economy and the creation or retaining of jobs. And jobs mean prosperity for everyone, for families, for working people. And if we don't have jobs in this area, there's going to be nobody walking these trails. And that's the truth. So I think we need to face the fact that our economy is changing, and we are changing from a timber-based economy to something else. And the something else we haven't reached yet because the timber industry is still with us. But we need to develop some sort of industry so that we have some jobs up here. And without the railroad, I think that would be extremely difficult. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, could I put that since I'm not there, how many more speakers we have? I might need to readjust my schedule.
I think we're down to 2 at this point in time.
Thank you.
And they promised me they're going to be brief. I can see it on their faces. Very brief.
Well, we have one here that wants to speak too.
Okay, great. Remind me when we get there.
Okay.
My name is Mike Bittner. I'm a resident of Eureka, and you know, after listening to all this and all the discussions that happen here, and I'm very much someone who reads all those documents on the NCRA's website, and very much appreciate seeing the minutes when they do get posted, so I can keep track of what has happened at previous meetings. But I think what's happening here, and there's a division in our community, obviously, about this issue. And I hate to say it, but I think the responsibility falls on this board, because the sorts of misinformation that seem to come up because we hear these things, we hear the contradictions, there's no timeline, and you know, it's unfair to the community to allow some people to believe that they're going to hop on a train here and take it to San Francisco one afternoon, when that may never happen. That when freight is running, it probably will not do it coincidentally with passenger train. I can't say that's for sure, but I'm just saying, if without those hard facts of having a timeline, knowing when your best guess is that the rail will reopen in Eureka, with the best guess when it's going to happen, and yes, you got to do the EIR and all that first, but without having some hard facts and having all this contradictory information instead, it creates this illusion that something is happening or not happening. And you have, like I said, you have people who support passenger train or commuter rail or excursion rail. Well, that's wonderful because you get a lot of support that way. But you're also letting them hang there without knowing what is the time frame, what is the plan. We have a plan to have a plan, all those sorts of things. And I rely primarily on reading Hank Sims' articles in the North Coast Journal to really know a lot of the details. And I totally appreciate the fact that Judy Arnold is representing Marin County, because I think there is another balance to this whole decision, and there is some structure to the way she looks at things that maybe isn't happening today. So what I ask of you is be responsible to your communities throughout up and down the coast, and be as honest with them and as straightforward with the facts as you can be. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Al Burris. I'm the transportation manager for the Hamburg Group. And in a matter of brevity, I will just hand out my brief statement written. There are copies you can take down to the members that aren't present today. Just like to say, the last year that the railroad did operate, the Humboldt Flakeboard panels, where I'm located, shipped around 1,500 cars out, and we have every intention to use the railroad when it gets back.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Sarah Dykeman. I'm an Arcata resident, and I commute and bike the corridor on my bicycle quite often. The corridor is our asset, and right now we're letting it rot. No one's getting anything out of it right now. So let's use rail banking to bring economic, health, and safety benefits to our communities now. When the railroad's ready, we can go from there, but the corridor is an asset to all of us, and we should be working together right now to bring as much benefit to the community as we can. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Judy, you said somebody has a comment at your end?
Yes, we have a member of the public. You want to identify yourself, David?
Yeah, this is David Schomburg, president of Transnet. We're longtime supporters of NCRA. I wanted to express our pleasure at being able to attend an NCRA meeting right here in Marin County. And so thank you for making this opportunity available. And also wanted to suggest that in future meetings, if it's possible to provide better sound amplification, the directors who who are distant from Mr. Chair, and the public and your council are not well heard on this end due to inadequate amplification, and perhaps in future meetings that can be remedied. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments, David. Yeah, I'm going to defer to Chairman Woolley at this point in time because he's Chairman Woolley. He should be.
No, wait. And I would like to take an opportunity to respond to some of the comments because, again, we only meet up here once every 3 months. And when we have interested participants, giving us, I think it is.
Hold on for a second, Judy. I'm going to try to move this.
How's this, Judy? Okay, sure. I think the concept of the mandate is really interesting to NCRA. We've used a great deal of public dollars to purchase the line for running rail, and I think that's inherent in the mission of, obviously, with the legislation. So we already have an investment from state and federal sources to bring back the rail. The rail is not over, it's suspended. That's how I've been taught from council and staff, that the Surface Transportation Board sees this as a suspended rail, not something that has been closed. It was last running about 1998. So it has been a while, but it's not been, as someone mentioned, back to their youth, I think. I can't remember the actual reference, but it has been a while, but it's still been a diligent effort on our parts to try and get the funds together. NCRA was created without public funds given to it to really start it all off. So then it has really been really an uphill fight all the way to carry out what the mandate has required. And to that end, if this weren't here, the cost of putting the rail to bed would be astronomical as well. So this authority has a lot of challenges that it has been living with, but is still moving forward. To the rail banking concept, Mr. Sales, who is Alta's planning agent that worked with the planning team, and I want to thank Karen Deemer from the city of Arcata as well for being here today, because she was an active participant. The planning team is meeting, I think, October 29th, so we'll be back in session. So let me jump to that real quick. We've only been keeping the board informed with the progress because there wasn't anything to bring to it yet, only that we had committed by vote that we'd work with rails with trails concepts, and that's what's been placed into the planning team horizon. And the document is a feasibility study, not an actual plan, but a feasibility study based upon several options for rail with trails being one of them. And it is complicated, as Mr. Meserve talked about, because the Caltrans corridor is in the same vicinity. And they have a mandate as well, as has been noted by Green Wheels, to provide for alternative transportation. So in their designs, we think from NCRA's perspective, they should be an equal partner, if not more so, because they have the funds, not we, to really develop what we think would be a good deal for both rails with trails. So the rail banking thing, as I was saying, came up in discussion in the planning session. Mr. Sales indicated that rail banking works if the authority could make a 20-year commitment not to bring back. In other words, the 20-year commitment would be to have that corridor go into a trail system. But meanwhile, we're midway into our legitimate process we're following to determine how this is going to work north of Willits, taking in both the canyon and this end. So it's too early to call, and we can't go against the mandate that we have at this point. Now, I suppose it could change legislatively, but it doesn't make sense from my perspective with all the resources being put into it to bring back the rail. So that's where I sit with this matter, is we've got to finish the analysis in order to determine whether or not we can make a feasible go of it for rail operations north of Willits. Then if we find, for whatever reasons, and I can remain as skeptic as I have been, or be critical at the same time, that then that's the choice and time frames by which we can then make a decision. So when will that be done? As a benchmark, I'm hoping, because we do have the resources, correct me if I'm wrong, to begin the environmental impact report that will start to give us the data sometime next year. We start that off. So we will be periodically reviewing that, and we'll be looking for that report to come out that will guide us to the next step. I think that's in summary. If there are any other questions? Oh, thank you. The billboard question did come up, and we've been trying to get the billboard folks to cooperate with us, but then we realized that, and this also relates to, if you will, the trails issue, is that not all the whole length is owned, I believe, by NCRA inside this corridor of about 6.25 miles. Some of it is owned by other parties, and therefore we have what would be called an easement on top of that to run rail. You can guess that can complicate matters. So anyway, long story short, we now have the maps identified to the deeds, so we can ground proof where the billboards are, so we can be assured that when we speak to the companies, we know exactly which billboards we want them to bring down. We can begin that process once the 4 missing deeds are found, and we can bring that together. So I think we're making progress.
Thank you, John, for your activity in both of those areas. Item G, presentations. I think we've pretty well done that. Mitch, is there anything specifically that we're dealing with there? Thank you. We're now to the conduct of business. Item H1.
Yes. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Recall that in March and April, the California Transportation Commission allocated a little over $9 million.
Speak a little more loudly. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Here, why don't you come up, take mine?
Thank you so much.
Mr. Chair, while Rich is getting set up, may I make a comment, follow up to some of the comments that we heard?
Yeah, please do. Director Jeter.
I've just been on this entity for 6 or 8 months, and I have to say I'm a little bit schizophrenic. I know the railroad has been trying aggressively to get things going in the south end of our jurisdiction, and obstacles are being set in place to our progress down there, and up here to the north, we're being encouraged to move ahead, and I think many more obstacles in Sacramento and Washington, D.C. So I'm really feeling schizophrenic and not exactly sure what I'm supposed to be doing up here. But I hear all these comments from the public here, and we don't get that kind of participation in the southern end. It appears like a lot of these folks, while the attack seems to be at us, I think they're with us and potential foot soldiers. If we could somehow put a package together in combination with our mandate and maybe a strategic plan or a guideline of what, in a best case scenario, we're trying to do, and who and what they contact to support our mission. I think there's just some communication links that aren't connecting. And I think rather than this turning into an antagonistic public session, it could become a teamwork building. So I don't know if that's feasible, if we could work even in one of our committees, but some factual information to provide to the public on how they can help us get to where they want us to be.
I think it's a good point, Gabe. We hit on some things here today that may trouble us, but it also spur us to improve the communication and find some ways again to find common ground. This was a theme that came up from a couple of the public speakers. I think the rail bank thing is a big challenge, but if there's other ways to skin the cat, and it's just a function of getting the money, if you get enough people shaking the right trees, a lot of things can happen. So, thank you. Go ahead, Mitch.
Can you hear me now, Director Arnold?
Yes, thank you so much.
All right. Recall that in March and April, CTC allocated a little over $9 million to repair 54 crossing signal warning systems between the interchange near Napa, a place called Lombard, and Windsor. The successful bidder for the first signal contract was Mass Electric. Are you still there? All right.
It's my fault.
The board approved the contract and gave notice to proceed on July 11th for the repair of the first signal contract, which is about 28 signal crossings. That work is now underway, and on October 5th, bids were opened for the second signal contract package for the remaining of them are a little in excess of what our budget allows. So we have to go back and, with our on-call engineering team, and reevaluate and restructure the bids and see what's possible in the context of either the existing bids or rebidding the contract. In any case, staff is not prepared today to recommend contract award for the second signal package. We'd like to, as I say, review the bids in more detail, make some decisions with the goal of calling a special board meeting before our next regularly scheduled meeting in November.
Can I ask a question, Mr. Chair?
Yes, please do.
What exactly then is the executive director recommending on each one?
Staff is recommending that rather than award the second contract, that the project manager and the on-call engineering team be allowed to review the two bids that we received with an eye towards reevaluating, changing, either rebidding those contracts or coming up with a package that's acceptable to the board.
Yeah, Director Arnold, this is Alan. I've also suggested that we ramp up some of the involvement of the operator committee on an interim basis. These things are going too fast. We're waiting from board meetings to board meetings, so we're going to convene a meeting of the operator committee for next week to meet with the contractor and review a number of contract issues that are going to need some direction, and certainly for approval it'll come back to the full board, probably in a special meeting. Okay?
Yes, thank you. Are you going to have public comment on this at some point?
Yes, we will, in fact. I'm going to go first to the board for questions on this subject. Any of the board members have questions on the staff's report?
You can use that microphone down here. Oh, then she can't see it.
Yeah, no, either. Okay. I see no questions from the board. Are there any questions from the public on this?
Yes, in Marin here. Do you have someone up there you'd like to have first?
Yeah, we have. Go ahead. Why don't you go ahead for Marin? We'll do it differently this time. Go ahead.
Be good. This is Jean McLaney, serving as a member of the public at the moment, and I'd like to read into the record two letters from Jeff Walter of Walter Pistole, City Attorney, City of Novato. First letter is dated October 9th, 2007, to Mr. Stogner and Christopher Neary. Dear Mr. Stogner and Neary, the agenda for the October 10th, 2007 meeting of the Board of Directors for the NCRA indicates that at items H1 and 2, the Board will be asked to consider possibility of taking action regarding the award of a contract entitled Signal Package Number 2, as well as issuing a notice to proceed pertinent to that contract. Please be advised, the City of Novato objects to the NCRA Board Directors taking action with respect to the Signal Package Number 2 because the NCRA has not complied with CEQA and undertaken the necessary environmental analysis and approved the necessary CEQA documents prior to taking action on this item. It is the City of Novato's position that such work is not categorically exempt under CEQA, requires an environmental analysis under CEQA, and the preparation, circulation, and certification of an EIR before this project is acted upon by the Board of Directors. It is the City's further position. The notices of exemption upon which the NCRA may be relying in approving Signal Package Number 2 are inadequate and inapplicable because, among other things, the Signal Package Number 2 is part of a project to upgrade the relevant railroad right-of-way to Class 3 standards, which expands the use and increases the capacity of the railroad to accommodate more trains traveling at higher rates of speed. Moreover, the upgrading work with Signal Package Number 2 contemplates will cause significant environmental effects which, if not mitigated, will adversely affect the city and its citizens. Please make this objection part of the record of the Board's October 10th, 2007 meeting. Until yours, Jeff Walter Pistole. And then finally, the second
this letter as supplemental to my October 9th, 2007 letter objecting to the board's consideration of the above referenced contract at today's NCRA board meeting. In addition to the reasons set forth in my October 9th, 2007 letter, the City of Novato's objections are based on the fact that by considering this contract, the NCRA is impermissibly segmenting the whole of the project, namely the rehabilitation and operation of the entire NWP line. Additionally, the City of Novato objections are based on the reasons set forth in its petition for writ of mandamus filed Marin County Superior Court on September 28, 2007 concerning NCRA's failure to comply with CEQA. Please include this letter as part of the record of the NCRA Board Directors meeting of October 10, 2007. Sincerely yours, Jeff Walter Costello. Thank you very much.
We will note that those are included in the record. Council has a comment.
Yes, Jeannie,
Can you hear him, Jeannie?
Yes, I can. Thank you. This is Christopher Neary speaking.
correct. I understand that that you're the mayor of the city of Novato, and that this letter states that the letting of the signals contract would adversely affect the city and its citizens. I'm wondering if you could expand on the ways in which the proposed contract would affect the city.
No, I should not at this time. I would prefer that any such questions go through our attorney, Jeff Walter Costello. Thank you for the question.
Further public comment from Marin, please.
Go ahead.
David Schoenbrunn with Transdev. I wanted to point out that the comments that you heard read into the record are, besides being irrelevant to today's meeting because the action they commented on is actually not going forward today, they're based on a preposterous legal theory. And in addition, they're entirely inconsistent with the position taken by the Novato city manager in his editorial in yesterday's Independent Journal, in which he merely said that Novato is attempting to make sure that NCRA does right for Novato. I see it quite differently. I see, in particular, the allegations made today having to do with the rehabilitation contracts as a very direct attempt to hurt NCRA and to make the project fail by removing public funds from it. I think they're being entirely hypocritical and deceitful, in fact. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. We have one speaker from here, and then we're going to have to change the order.
If I could just ask, if that's okay, if I could just ask a question?
Please do.
I'm wondering if we can hear the people in Marin very well. Can they hear the public comments that we have made up here?
No.
Oh, yeah, we can hear.
Okay. Can you hear them very all? Because these comments up here are very important. And maybe in response to some of the comments that were made up here by people who have not been aware of this issue for a long time, maybe if Marin County had gotten into this issue a long time ago, like we have been, maybe you would know a little bit more about what NCR has been trying to do all this time. Anyway, I want to make sure that you down there get all of our comments from up here. That's all.
Thank you, Kate. We have another comment here.
My name is LaBranche. Anyhow, I just want to comment on the Novato's thing about the notice of exemption. Talking with the Surface Transportation Board, the notice of exemption for changing operators has nothing to do with the environmental. Because their reasoning is that there is no environmental change between the two. So.
That's a question?
No, it's what a state. That's talking with the Surface Transportation Board. So Remarkable questions have nothing to do with the change of operator specs.
Okay, thank you. We need to move out of order here for a few minutes. I'm going to take the chairman's prerogative to go ahead and move to the audit report. We have a scheduling problem with our auditing team, so unless there's objection, we'll hold these other items and ask the audit team to come up and present their report. We have a comment from Director Moore.
You know, that's fine. Just a point of order. I just recalled that I think due to the teleconferencing call-in, we have to do a roll call vote on each item of the vote. And that's what I've been taught, at least. And that would mean going back to the consent calendar vote. And then Heather would read off the names and then we... So that's...
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Let's dispense with that now. Heather, would you call the roll on the consent calendar, please?
Director Simonson?
Yes.
Director Kelly?
Yes.
Director Woolley?
Yes.
Director Olivier?
Yes.
Director Zedrick?
Yes.
Director Arnold?
Yes.
Director Leland? Director Colfax? Chairman Hemphill?
Also, you, I guess we left the issue of the alternate off to the side, so we can give you that. Director Hemphill votes yes. Thank you for your bringing this up this evening. I think that's the only action we can take tonight. Okay, please come forward with the audit report.
Morning. Thank you for calling me in a little bit sooner. My first.
You'll have to speak up a little bit.
Thank you for pulling my item and bringing it up sooner. I have a board meeting in Glendale at noon. So I'll walk you briefly through your audit report. I'll start with the opinion, which is on page 1. We've audited the financial statements of the North Coast Railroad Authority as of and for the year ended June 30, 2007. These financial statements are the responsibility of your management. Our responsibility is to express an opinion on these financial statements based on our audit. We conducted our audit in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards and government auditing standards. In our opinion, the financial statements present fairly in all material respects the financial position of the North Coast Railroad Authority as of June 30, 2007, in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. We've also issued our report in accordance with the government auditing standards, and the purpose of that report is to describe the scope of our testing of internal control and over financial reporting and compliance on the results of that testing. The management's discussion analysis, which is presented by management, is attached, and it is for the purpose of to provide users with a narrative introduction, overview, and analysis. We've applied certain procedures, but we have not audited this information and expressed no opinion on it. We'll turn next to page 8, which is the statement of your net assets. As you can see, your total assets are $23.3 million, and of that, you have total current assets of $3.6 million. Of that amount, $2.7 million is comprised of receivables due to your intergovernmental contracts on the TCRP projects. You have total restricted assets of $6.1 million, and that's primarily comprised of your funds in the LAF fund. Your capital assets are $13.4 million, which include a retirement this year of $519,000. There were no additions to your capital assets. Your total current liabilities are $13.3 million. It's comprised of an advance balance from your operator of $1.6 million, your accounts payable of $2.3 million, which is comprised of about $1.1 million in accounts payable under TCRP. Then you have accrued expenses, which is more detailed in Note 6, and due to other governments, which is detailed on Note 7. Your matured notes payable declined this year by $615,000, which was due to the forgiveness of your CDL loan. So your non-current liabilities are only $380,000 for total liabilities of $13 million. Your net assets this year are $9.5 million, And of that amount, you have 6.1 million in restricted net assets, and you have a deficit of your unrestricted net assets due to accumulated losses of 10 million. On the next page is your statement of revenues and expenses. Overall, you had 740,000 in operating revenue. Your property and operating leases were 734, and that contains your rents and leases from your operator and your equipment rent. Your total operating expenses were $6 million, and of that amount, 4.4 were project costs related to your TCRP projects. The other project costs included in there of 123,000 is included within your agency funds. You had a net operating loss of 5.3 million, and you recovered intergovernmental revenues of 4.4 million, investment earnings of 313,000. Overall, you had a net change in net assets of 114,000. That special item is your forgiveness of your CDL loan, your community disaster loan from FEMA, along with its related interest. On the next page is your statement of cash flows. Describes the sources and uses of your cash throughout the year. You see that your operating activities used 2.7 million. You had non-capital financing activities used 2.9 with a payment on your due to other governments of 24,000 and amount paid on a claim of 260,000. Your capital and related financing activity provided 3.6 million. You can see you had total advances on your bridge loan from NWP of 2.6 million, and you had debt reduction of about 991,000. Overall, you had an increase in cash of 867,000. The next several pages, 12 to about 20, are the notes to the financial statements, and they just provide a little bit more detailed information on account balances and describe your accounting procedures.
Question at this point, you would define this as a result of no particular concerns in terms of qualifications or anything else?
It's an unqualified opinion, and if you'll turn to page, doesn't have a page number. 22. It's our report on government auditing standards. It addresses our consideration of the internal control over financial reporting. Our procedures were limited for the purpose of designing our auditing procedures, but the results of our procedures did not identify any significant deficiencies that we consider to be material weaknesses. And the results of our test disclose no instances of noncompliance that are required to be reported under government auditing standards. This is one of the first years that we haven't had to conduct a single audit, or an audit in accordance with OMBA 133, because you didn't have federal expenditures. So it's just been based on what we call the Yellow Book of Government Auditing Standards. But it is a clean opinion.
Thank you. I think it's a clean opinion and serious opinion.
Yes, it is. Are there any questions?
I have one, Mr. Chairman.
Please go ahead,
On page 17 and 18, just three points of information. The community disaster loan on May 4th, FEMA relieved NCRA of all financial terms and conditions with a complete loan forgiveness. Why was that? Is that just standard, or what was the reasoning behind that?
I think Mitch could probably best answer that.
Okay.
Yes, that was a community disaster assistance loan from the storm during that period. And under federal guidelines, if the agency that's the recipient of the grant demonstrates a budget shortfall in 3 successive years, then it's entitled to have the loan forgiven. And this year we supplied them with all the material they needed to make that determination.
Okay, thank you. And then right under that, Pacific Lumber Company, we entered into a loan agreement with them for $80,000. What's the time limit of that loan? Or is there one?
actually is one. We have spoken to representatives of Pacific Lumber recently, and they've agreed informally to extend the payoff of that loan. They're interested in working out some sort of arrangement with us, and we have yet to finalize that.
Okay, and then on page 18, the loan to Harbor Recreation and Conservation District, they provided a loan for operating capital, and the loan is secured by the leases held by the NCRA. What does that mean?
Yeah, thanks to the Harbor District loan, when a bill that provided us some agency money was vetoed in October of 2005, the Harbor District, thanks to Director Olivier, stepped forward and gave us a loan that kept us literally going until we could finalize our FEMA grant. The collateral that we had to use for that is specific leases that totaled about $170,000 total of the loan.
So are the leases?
There are property leases along the line. I don't have them in front of me.
Okay.
Any other questions from directors? Any questions from the public on the audit?
Just a comment.
Director Woolley?
Well, I think that it shows that we've come a long way in maintaining our abilities to do the proper record keeping and financial accountabilities that we're required to do so. I want to thank Caltrans in helping us get to there, and I want to especially thank staff for being able to carry out this. I think it demonstrates that partnerships can work and making sure that we're carrying out what the public trust is required.
I certainly would echo Director Woolley's comments. That was why I asked the question. I think if you go back 5 or 6 years ago, when we were under intense scrutiny and for good reasons needed to make some corrections, we carried out our end of the bargain, and these audits clearly show that. So again, compliments to the staff, and thank you for presenting the audit results. So.
Thank you. I'd like to also thank the staff for their assistance during my audit.
Okay. Do we need to approve the audit?
I move that we accept the audit.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion on the audit? We'll call for approval by roll call.
Director Simonson?
Yes.
Director Kelly? Director Woolley?
Aye.
Director Olivier?
Yes.
Director Diedrich?
Yes.
Director Arnold?
Yes.
Director Colfax? Director Leland?
You forgot about me.
Oh, Chairman Hemphill.
Yes. Okay. We'll now move back onto the conduct of business items 3 and 4.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be very brief. We've got an ongoing problem in several communities along the line with respect to vagrancy and vandalism of railroad property, particularly abandoned rail cars. That's been an issue with local law enforcement at several locations, all up and down the line. And so staff, there's a particularly acute problem in the city of Willits where the rail maintenance yard is located. Legal counsel has spoken with the city manager and the city of Willits, and we've agreed to make a recommendation to the board to get an ad hoc committee to look at some solutions in terms of securing the equipment and or moving it or scrapping it. And so that's what our recommendation is today.
Thank you. I don't think this requires board approval, but certainly we'll ask for board comment. Director Simonson.
Mr. Chairman, there is a way to solve the problem in Willits, which will require the cooperation of the California Western Railroad. They have the only available power, but we can hook those cars to the 2 tracks to the California Western head. Both of them will be driven on both sides. I'm sure that if we move those cars
comment. I would suggest that the ad hoc committee talk to Bob about that. One drawback is they're pretty ugly, and if you had a house across the street from it, you might have some opinion on that.
Well, there's some pretty ugly houses.
Okay, well, you guys deal with that. I thought Willits was the garden spot of the West. I didn't know you had ugly houses. All right, well, do we have members that have volunteered for this committee, Mitch, or?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
By his absence here, sir.
A member of the public who is a good friend of ours, a gentleman by the name of Rod Whitney, has agreed to serve on this committee and to provide some volunteer services. He would have substantial credibility with the City of Willits council members who might be on the corollary committee of the city. I would recommend he be considered as a member of the ad hoc committee.
Well, certainly, then I'll suggest that Mitch collect the list of victims that would be willing to do this, and perhaps let me know what you're doing, and by the chair's action, we can do that.
I would point out that I'm not sure that the letter from the City of Willits expressed the urgency as much as might otherwise be apparent, but they're very anxious moving forward on this.
Yeah, it's been a magnet for problems. I've been aware of that for some time. Not just there's other cars in other spots too. So. Thank you, Mitch. And then the last item, we did the annual audit.
Mr. Chair, before you go to that, can I ask one question? Mitch, you said these were abandoned cars. I'm just curious. Is the ownership indeterminate on these cars? By default, we take responsibility for them?
That has been actually there is, in some cases, it is indeterminate. We know some of them, we know others own some of them there's some uncertainty about. That's part of the problem.
But our intent is to accept responsibility for all of them and try to eliminate the blight.
Well, maybe I can help with this because I headed the passenger committee a couple of years ago, and we had kind of an auction and sold some of them, and in some cases we were paid for them. In other cases, the buyers defaulted because they couldn't get them off the line to where they wanted to get them. I've submitted the last list that I had to Heather out of my files, and she's going to compare that and make some calls. The majority of the cars are owned by the railroad, and they're in varying states of disrepair. Some of them could be operable again, others are candidates for a scrap operation. But I think the first job is securing what we have and seeing that it isn't a public nuisance. We have an obligation to do that. And then as part of that process, figuring out where we're going to go with it and what we're going to do with it.
I would also hope that given the price of scrap metal right now, that maybe we turn this into a profit center as we clean it up.
Yeah, but you have to approach it a little carefully. There's asbestos in some of these, and so whoever came in, again, we've had enough issues with toxics that before anything happens, I want to make sure that this thing is vetted in terms of the process we go through. So. Thank you. And we already dealt with item 4, so we'll now move to staff reports. Executive Director report from Mitch. Yes, can you hear okay there, Judy?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. SB 861 by Senator Wiggins is on the governor's desk now. The governor has until the 14th of October to sign, veto, or let it become law without his signature. There are two critical things, I think, to remember here. One is that there's $1 million in this bill for so-called quiet zones, FRA-sanctioned quiet zones, specifically for the city of Nevada. In addition, there is language that specifically stipulates that prior to rail service north of Willits, a complete EIR must be certified and approved by the California Transportation Commission along with a feasibility study. So in terms of what happens north of Willits, that bill is real clear on that subject. So I guess I would just make a last appeal for all those who are interested in quiet zones and clarification of what's required north of Willits. Get your letters into the governor, make your phone calls. We need your help. This bill needs to get signed. In addition, the bill provides $3.5 million to clean up 9 do the subsurface cleanup of 9 rail sites that are required to be cleaned up under a 1999 court order, so-called environmental consent decree.
And I would add that these funds are there. They're not new funds. They're just being asked to be reallocated to those accounts that are required of NCRA, so it's not drawing down on general fund dollars, and the cleanup would be a responsibility of somebody at the state level if NCRA wasn't there. So it's really inherently responsible for us all to be supporting this bill simply for the cleanup purposes alone.
Very good. And I would also ask of our Marin members that they ask for a letter of support from the City of Novato, separate from any of the other issues swirling around here. There's a community of interest on this. And is that possible?
Mr. Chair, a letter I believe has gone out from the City of Novato to the governor.
Thank you very much. That's good.
Yes. We don't hold a lot of voters Republicans, however.
Well, everything will help, so thank you. Okay, Mitch, do you have anything else? Any questions from the board of Mitch on his report? Any questions from the public? Okay, Project Manager Dave Anderson.
Mr. Chairman, I think I'm going to need some assistance. I'm not sure. Judy, can you hear me from here?
Why did you come up here, Dave?
Okay. Yeah, I'm going to ask Angel to come up to help me with my PowerPoint.
That's great. And then come over here and use this mic that you're close to. All right, Judy?
Yes, thank you, Dave.
All right. In the public hearing?
Can you all hear me all right?
This one. All right.
Okay, I've got a PowerPoint presentation, and for those on the phone, I'll do my best to describe what's on the screen. An overview of the presentation is it's going to start with the 3 contracts that we currently have. The board has awarded and is under construction. And then also, I'm going to, at the end, go over the current schedule as our on-call consultant, HNTB, has prepared in conjunction with the NCRA staff. We're having a bit of a difficulty, I guess, getting the presentation on the screen. If you can just stand by. While we're waiting for the slides to come up, the first slide basically is just sort of an overview of construction project components, pretty much in parallel what Alan has said previously as far as what needs to transpire before we actually get into construction. And that includes conceptual design, preliminary design, and then we get into environmental clearance. We then have our funding applications to the CTC. We have environmental and local permitting for each project. We have final design and bid packages. And then we have bid advertisement per our policies and procedures. And then we have a bid opening, and we do our due diligence to make sure that these bids are in order and all of the required documents are present and signed. And then we get into, within the board, make a recommendation to the board for award. And after award, we provide notice to proceed. And then we have ongoing construction coordination with the operator, with the design team, resource agencies, permitting agencies, all the local cities and counties for encroachment permits, and also coordination with the contractors themselves. So we're still waiting for the slide to come up. Okay. Well, the first contract that I wanted to go over is the signal contract number 1, and that was to repair 28 signals in the Russian River Division, which basically go from Lombard to approximately, this first segment went up into the southern end of Santa Rosa. This is a TCRP project 32.9. The board awarded the contract July 11th. The contract amount is $5,818,640. This includes 4 categories of signal repairs. Category 1, which is basically minimal repairs, to Category 4, which is a complete replacement of the signals. In this first contract, we had 14 complete replacements, so it was a significant contract in regards to the overall signal repairs that are needed from Lombard to Windsor. I've got a slide here. I think you can go ahead too. Okay. I already covered it. Yeah. Okay. So we go to the first slide, which is the picture slide that shows Milton. What we've got shown here is what Category 4, and it's an old signal that needs complete replacement. The PUC is requiring that it have proper setback, and as you can see on the left, that this was hit by a vehicle, and we believe that SMART has insurance money of about $70,000 to $80,000 to help with this particular signal. But this shows, the intent of this slide is to show what a Category 4 is all about. The next slide shows a Category 2, which is Stone Tree Lane, which is basically a new signal. It's a Category 2 because we had vandalism and we have to replace some of the predictors inside the signal cabinet. But it's this we think was about a $50,000 effort. So these next slides are actually, we awarded, as I said, on July 11th, and Mass Electric has fully mobilized. They have planned their work. They've coordinated with the cities, Marin County. We met with them out at Grandview. We met with Nevada City's engineer as far as encroachment permits, and all up the line. So they've got it all planned, and here this is just showing some of their safety signs, making sure that the traveling public know that there is construction going on. The next slide is actually showing some trenching, putting conduit within our right-of-way underneath our rail bed. And then the next slide shows the compaction. And I think the next slide shows this is actually required because in this particular location, it's the rail is not continuously welded rail, and so what we have to do is bond the rail segments to make sure that we have a complete circuit. The next slide, this one highlights King Salmon, which is a TCRP project 32.4 under the urgent repair, and that was awarded by the board September 12th of 2007 with a contract amount of $558,928. For this particular contract, we received 4 bids, and this came in about, I think about 20,000 under the engineer's estimate. We have 4 permits for this work, which required a number of items to complete before we started work. We are in compliance with all the permits, and October 1st, Kernan Construction actually started work, and of the first 500 feet, the Coastal Commission, recognizing that this first 500 feet is in urgent need of repair, issued us an emergency permit to get started, and we're still going through the permitting for the next 2,600 feet of the repair project. So, the next slide. This slide shows this first 500-foot segment where we have a lot of debris that actually is not helping the situation at all. It's actually caused some of the problem. But over the years, the railroad has placed what they could to ward off the energy from the waves from the bay, which can be up to, I think according to our studies, up to 28 feet. Next slide shows more of the debris in the same location. I believe the next slide also shows a shot looking north at the north end of this area. And then now we've got some shots that the contractor was required to put in a silt fence, which you can't see behind the orange fence. The orange fence is a construction fence just to make sure that this contractor is well aware that they're not to go outside of our right-of-way. And of course, the silt fence is to help with any sort of silt runoff. And you can see what they've done is they've pulled the track. In this particular segment, you can see that all the ties really stayed attached, which we were very happy. And most of these ties are in very good shape. And so when the contractor is done with the revetment repairs, we're going to pull that back and bring it up to a standard where we can high rail or at least get work trains over. But the contract does not include bringing this track up to any particular class. The next slide is a shot in the 500-foot area where Kernan has got three excavators working. They're proceeding from the south end, and they're doing about a 75-foot segment at a time. They're concerned about potential storms, and so we don't want to expose too much at one time. And they're fully prepared to button up what they undo in a very quick order. Next slide. Here's another shot of them removing the debris. Another one. Next slide. And this is where they're loading it up into these 20-yard dump trucks and hauling it off. And they haul off debris, and then they bring back new revetment. So they're reconstructing it as they go. This slide is the Shellville dewatering, which is for many months this has been sort of the critical path, if you will, for us to get in future equipment and materials for our planned rehabilitation of this first phase of the Russian River Division. And the 2005-2006 storms did substantial damage, and most of this damage was to fishing game levees that basically surround the railroad, and as a result of these breaches, our railroad is I'll show some pictures, is actually underwater. The NCRA board approved in July 11th for the dewatering. Cooper Crane and Rigging is the contractor. September 18th was their start of work, and the contract amount was $1.542 million. This is really a fish and game contract. They're fully funding it, and it's another urgent repair contract. This slide, and I'm going to have to move away from the mic just for a second because I want to point out some real critical items of this whole project. This is the railroad through here, and all of this area is one gigantic lake. And you can go on Google and see this. It's really an incredible picture of what we're up against. And what happened in the 2005-2006 storms, there's a major breach that you can just see here. It's a little black area. That's railroad slough. And that is what allowed all of the water to come in, flood this entire area, which is really agricultural land. And the theory is that it then overtopped the railroad, which you can kind of see all the way through here. These are railroad embankment breaches. And then they went over, and this is Fish and Game's outboard levee. And you can see here, 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 and here, and there's a couple more down here. Those are breaches that need to be repaired before we can de-water that whole entire area. Cooper Crane and Rigging is currently they have mobilized. They've got a dock built. They've got cranes and portable barges. And then what they're going to do is they're going to float out to that major breach at Railroad Slough and drive sheet piles to stop the continued flooding of the area. In those sheet piles, they're going to put two large culverts with floodgates so that they can control the waters in our giant lake here, so that they can. So after they stop the tidal influence, they're going to close it at high tide so they can float out to the exterior levee where we have about 710 feet of levee breaches that they're going to then temporarily repair with a sheet pile. And once that's accomplished, then they are going to open up the floodgate as the tide is going out and allow this whole area to become dewatered. So it's quite a significant project. You know, I've got a couple of pictures here of this is the main breach at Railroad Slough, where this is high tide, or tide's coming in, and it's creating this massive lake. The next slide, please. This is our railroad embankment. There's obviously been washed out and underwater. Here's another shot, and it's hard to see, but going down pretty much the middle of the picture there is a fiber optic line that is under operation. This is Cooper Crane and Rigging at their launch site with their crane, and they're beginning to build a dock so they can launch their barges. Next slide. There you can see them driving the sheet pile with our lake, and that's the beginning of their dock. That currently is now all filled with aggregate, and they have mobilized their portable barges, which they launched off of that dock. I think that's the end of the photos of current construction underway. Our overall schedule, I start out with our current construction status, the Shellville dewatering, which I just showed you, and our signal contract number 1 and King Salmon construction are all underway as of the 1st of October. San Antonio Creek, which is one of our first urgent repair contracts, is all complete, and Caltrans is in the process of closing that out with us. And then we have the track, bridges, the Shellville embankment once that lake is dewatered, and this last signal contract are remaining major items on our schedule. So some of the controlling factors of the schedule I'm about to show you include, as I just mentioned, the Shellville dewatering, Obviously, it's pretty difficult to get through that area until we repair that roadbed. And then we have, of course, a limited TCRP budget. We have escalating construction costs, and we have cash flow constraints. So these are all items that, as Alan said, will be key items that we'll be discussing. And a lawsuit, okay. So, so with that background, the next slide shows our overall schedule. The first three items, well, the first item again shows Shellville dewatering starting October, finishing in December. We are completing the Shellville design for once it's dewatered. We are coordinating that with the operator, and the operator has signed off on our design. SMART has reviewed it and is in the process of signing off on the design. And that is, we hope to have all of our approvals and be able to award that contract in December to basically repair it in kind. King Salmon, the permit documents require that we complete the emergency permit from the Coastal Commission gives us until October 21st. And I was out at the site this morning reviewing the overall progress, and the contractor is very comfortable that they're going to be able to finish by that date, or if not before. We have we're ongoing with some of our, of course, our environmental, the EIR for operations. We've got just a little bit of plans, specs, and engineers' estimates for the movable bridges that are not quite complete yet. We've got signal contract number 1, or package 1 and 2, which we awarded as one contract to Mass Electric, which I just showed you. That started October and is programmed to go out through May. The third signal contract, we had assumed that we would be awarding that in October, and if in fact we can award this in the next week or so, then they will be completing that package in the June timeframe. The schedule was set for working days, calendar days, rather, so that they would be completing by June 15th if we could have awarded it today. So that's likely to slip a little bit. Our bridge construction for all of our timber bridges, that is out to bid, and we've had a lot of interest. We had 19 contractors show up for our mandatory pre-bid meeting, and we've got several contractors, a lot of correspondence going back with clarifications of plans and making sure that they can give us a responsible bid. And that currently is scheduled for a bid opening on October 16th, I believe. So the last couple lines there, we've got the movable bridge, as I said, that is still under design, and we should have that completed by December, and then we're hoping to be able to go out to award here at the beginning of the year. The last two items, the Canyon EIR, EIS, there's been a lot of discussion on that schedule, and as has been mentioned, what we have done so far is we've been able to fly the area so that we can have up-to-date digital mapping, which is extremely important, and we've not had that in the past, so that we can really define what needs to be out there. We have had our geotech do a reconnaissance, about a 3-week reconnaissance, knowing that the geology is probably the most significant part of the repairing of in the concerns for the canyon, so that we will be getting their report here in the next month or so, and that'll be some of the first steps for us to start putting together a project description, which is extremely important as far as the environmental process, because they need to know exactly what we're proposing to do and the limits of that so they can start doing their surveys. Then the last item is the environmental consent decree, which is still in progress as far as our latest allocation. Kleinfelter is doing our site, I forget what they call it, site characterization plans. And they ran into, they had them fairly complete. And in reviewing some of their information with the North Coast Water Quality Control Board, what was discovered is that apparently the North Coast Water Quality Control Board had moved in the last year or so, and they discovered boxes of relevant information, documentation, and that documentation has basically put us back to almost square one as far as these site characterization plans. So now we're in the process of discovering just exactly what that means as far as budget, and so we will have some updates on that here in the near future. That pretty much covers it. I'd entertain any questions.
Questions from the board?
Dave, on that last discussion item, then will you give us an update next meeting where we are within that EIR process?
Companion?
Mm-hmm.
See, a month from now, the latest conversation that Shannon Wilson is the geotech that's doing the survey. They have been through the canyon now. This is their third time, so they're very familiar with what's out there. Their commitment is to get us in the next month the first segment from Willits to Dos Rios. They've had that information for a while. It's been really a scheduling nightmare to get out to some of these areas. There's no access roads, you have to go through ranches, and we have literally spent 6 weeks trying to schedule, because some of these ranchers are only part-time there to get in. So they just finished their survey, and I would think that we're probably on the order of 3 months before we get that report. And that'll be the first step in trying to figure out exactly what we're doing. 2 months.
Any other questions from board members? Any questions from the public on this matter? Yes, please come forward and identify yourself.
My name is Melvin McKinney. I'm considering that on the King Salmon project, did you ever apply for any Title 33 funds? At least your EIR should have spoke to the fact that the wave action and why this dike is being failed. And Title 33 funds from the Corps of Engineers would address it. And I think you overlooked it.
I'm sorry, what's your name?
Melvin McKinney.
Yeah, Melvin, we've talked in the past. I called you, and this has become kind of a political issue.
Come over here so they can hear you.
Yeah.
This is really a political issue that is bigger than just NCRA, as you well are aware. And I know this is something that the Humboldt Harbor District has tried to address. It became clear to us, in order to get this done in a timely manner, that we needed to do this as an emergency under our urgent repair contract. That is not to say that this isn't something that we can continue to pursue. There's a lot of areas that, in addition to this 500 feet, that are impacted, and so I understand that those funds are potentially there, but I also understand in the past that we were unsuccessful in pursuing that. But I don't think we should give it up.
No, I would recommend that you not give it up and to continue to work on this project because we're going to have to live with it. Because everything from King Salmon around that whole track area is subject to that issue of Title 33 funds. Because we're going to have ongoing erosion from now on anyway. We've had that erosion going on since King Salmon was repaired. And it will continue to work north. So under the oceanographers' recommendations that I talked to, this is an issue that we should keep pursuing until such time as they recognize that they are a part of the problem. So that, thank you.
Thank you.
Director Wolby.
Dave, can you refresh us what Melvin is referring to? Is that an Army Corps grant source? Or?
Yes.
So
yes.
that would embellish or help us if we could get into that.
Yes.
So for the rest of it then. So is that in your wavelength?
Well, I think that's something we have to pursue with Dave Hall,
Okay.
because that is something I know has been pursued in the past.
Okay. So you'll take a look at that soon and get back to us.
Yeah, I just have a comment regarding what Cap just told you and also the whole EIR issue. So many people up here have complained, NCRA doesn't tell us what's going on. NCRA doesn't tell us why if they're going to be able to get here by 2011 or 2095. Because you haven't done the EIR work yet. You haven't been given the go-ahead, the funding, and all. So to make a long story short, that's why it's unfortunate that you do have to alternate your meetings in the different locations, and you don't get here very often. And I know you can't do much of anything about that, but we need a really informative public availability, a meeting, a workshop, or whatever that can go on public access TV up here, and people will hear. You're not keeping secrets from them, you just haven't done it yet. And you haven't been able to do it yet. But anyway, if we could, and I've talked to John about this a little bit too, and we just haven't gotten around to doing it, but I think it's something that we need to do, especially if you're going to put the trail issue on your next agenda when you come up here. If we can educate some of the people that haven't been involved between now and then, it should make a big difference. So whatever we can do to help, we will do. But, it takes all of us.
Well, to that point, I mean, as part of the environmental review process, there are specific points where the public is brought into the process. But
right.
It's a chicken and egg thing. I mean, it has to start somewhere.
But that's the kind of thing that our group has been trying to tell people. They haven't done it yet because they were not giving the money to do that yet. And they thought they were given a choice to go south or south. So we didn't have any choice to go south.
Thank you. Any other directors have any questions? Good. Well, thank you for your report, Dave. That's gratifying to see, and it's nice to see things moving forward. Again, we're going to try and convene an operator committee meeting for next week to further drill into these things in collaboration with the author. Before we leave today, let's compare schedules on that.
I just one little point of clarification. This draft should, somebody could interpret that the EIR, EIS is going to be completed June 08. That's not what this is meant to. This is showing, this is where, through this period, this is not going.
Okay, thank you. Good point. Could somebody get some lights here? I'll go with the lights. Thank you.
Alan, I didn't hear the last comment. He said the EIR, EIS for the canyon was going to be completed by June 08.
That's why he said it. You didn't hear it, though. Go ahead, Dave.
Yes, I'm standing right here. The slide that I've got up only shows it's a bar chart schedule, and it only shows out to June 08. And
Okay.
the EIR, EIS runs right to that date. And
runs off.
Need a lot more wall.
You guys need a lot more wall.
Okay.
Thank you. Call for legal counsel's report.
Yes, I just have a brief report. During the past month, we commented upon a proposed PUC rule at the urging of Union Pacific Railroad that relates to a proposed rule which would give PUC authority to issue fines for relatively minor non-compliance issues, basically maintenance issues. We worked in coordination with legal staff for Union Pacific.
We can't hear.
Then I also have, before the day's out, I have two handouts from the board, an opinion regarding the conduct of closed session, which should be a benefit to the Policy and Procedures Committee over the next month as they grapple with various issues. And also some correspondence back and forth between myself and the County Council of Marin regarding the appointment process of Marin directors. I just want to update the board on that communication. And other than that,
Do you have those documents with you today?
yes.
Okay, thank you. Any questions of legal counsel? Any questions from the public? Okay,